when somebody has a problem, like an addiction, for example, they say that the first step on the road to recovery is admitting that they have an addiction, admitting that they have a problem. Because once they've admitted it, they can then deal with it. But if you don't admit to yourself that there's a problem there, then how are you ever going to deal with the problem? The problem is going to persist and it's not going to go nowhere. In fact, it may even get worse. Chris Eubank Jr., following his comprehensive schooling at the hands of George Groves, has not fully come to terms with the problems that he evidently has got. We found out who and what Chris Eubank Jr. really is in that George Groves fight. For those of us who were not 100% sure, now we are 100% sure. In the post-fight press conference, Chris Eubank was talking about how he thought, I'm actually going to struggle to say these words here, people, because it's so shocking. Chris Eubank Jr. said how he thought that he just nicked it on the cards against George Groves. Jesus, people, Jesus. I guess he was maybe a little emboldened by the fact that the judges had it way closer than they should have had it, because there's no way that Chris Eubank Jr. won more than, 3 rounds in the fight? I only gave him 2 rounds personally, but 3 rounds tops? Maybe he was emboldened by the fact that the judges were bizarrely sympathetic to him. He was talking about weight. He was talking about George Groves headbutting him. He was talking about George Groves holding him. I didn't think that the holding from George Groves was particularly excessive. There was holding in there, but I think he did get warned at one stage for holding, but it wasn't anything crazy from George Groves, in terms of the holding. And the headbutting, I mean, I saw Eubank Jr. boring in with his head more than George Groves. And I know the clash of heads did happen from a cut. The cut did happen from a clash of heads. But from what I remember, that wasn't George Groves boring in with his head. That was Eubank Jr. boring in and the heads clashed. It wasn't really a situation where it was, anyone did a headbutt deliberately. It was just a clash of heads because it was a rough fight. This wasn't like Victor Ortiz headbutting Floyd Mayweather or Vladimir Klitschko headbutting Tyson Fury. No, this was just a clash of heads, which tends to happen in close quarters situations in fights when guys are fighting with a lot of emotion and intensity. The heads do clash, but I didn't see anything deliberate there. But again, Eubank Jr. is looking for crutches to lean on until he admits to himself that he has gone wrong, that he himself has made mistakes and made bad choices. Then he's pretty much a write-off as a fighter. I'm sure a lot of people saw the Prince Naseem clip. If they didn't see it live, they saw the Prince Naseem clip where after the fight, Prince Naseem is saying that Chris Eubank Jr. should retire. And I've seen an IFL interview where George Groves was told about what Prince Naseem said, and George Groves very graciously in victory said, no, I don't think Eubank Jr. should retire. I think that's very harsh from Prince Naseem. I don't think Eubank Jr. should retire. He should, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but he said, I think he should just go away to the States and spend some time in the Mayweather gym, rebuild, change his team, his training setup, get a proper trainer and all that kind of business, and just be someone in the Mayweather gym learning his craft, which is what I said in my post-fight video. So I definitely agree with George Groves there. That's what Eubank Jr. should do if he's ever going to achieve his full potential. His dad, Eubank Sr., said that his son is better than what he showed in the ring. And I agree, his son is better. His son did underperform. But why did he underperform? He underperformed because he doesn't truly believe in himself, which again is kind of amazing when you look at how boastful and how brash Chris Eubank Jr. appears to be out of the ring. How much bluster there is, how he sees himself, or ostensibly sees himself, as so much better than the people he's about to step in the ring with. He acts as though they've got no chance, and he was the same with George Groves. But when he got in the ring, he clearly didn't look like a man who believed his own pre-fight talk. And he says also, one of the things he's saying is that he underestimated George Groves. I don't think he did underestimate George Groves. I think he overestimated himself. How can you underestimate a man whose career is out there for everyone to look at? You know, this is not some guy who's come from obscurity. And like, for example, James DeGale, I think, underestimated Caleb Truax. But I don't see how how Eubank Jr. underestimated George Groves. How did he underestimate? I don't think he underestimated him at all. Everyone knows what George Groves is about. Everyone knows what he can do. Like, I don't see Eubank Jr. underestimating George Groves. He sparred Groves hundreds of rounds. I just think Eubank Jr. overestimated himself. That's what it was. He saw himself as far better than he actually was. Now, from a psychological point of view, Chris Eubank Jr.'s approach is clearly wrong. It clearly isn't working for him, because this is the second time he's stepped up now, and the second time he's been exposed pretty much at the highest level in boxing. Some fighters respond well to pressure. Some fighters respond well to putting pressure on themselves. Perhaps Eubank Sr., in fact, I suspect this is definitely the case. Eubank Sr. was one of those fighters who responded well to putting pressure on himself, to talking big and what have you before a fight. It would give him extra motivation to perform to the best of his ability. This is how Eubank Sr. was. And Eubank Sr. is thinking, I'm assuming that he's thinking that his son is the same as he was mentally, but his son is clearly not the same in terms of responding to pressure. He's not the same. He doesn't have the same internal constitution that his father had. If you look at fighters like Tyson Fury, a good example, somebody who puts pressure on himself and that actually makes him perform better. Fury puts pressure on himself, but he can handle it. Yeah, he gets in the ring and he truly believes the things that he says, Tyson Fury, when he's talking about I'm better than the other guy and this, that, and the other. He truly believes it in his soul. Chris Eubank Jr., when he got in there against George Groves, you could tell immediately he didn't really believe what he was saying. He didn't really believe what all his pre-fight boasts. You know, he looked like a guy who had been faking it, and now it was a reality check time. Audley Harrison would put pressure on himself, and he couldn't take the pressure that he was putting on himself. You know, he couldn't take it. So somebody like Harrison would have been better off being humble. That approach mentally of just being quiet at press conferences, being humble, you know, just being like a silent assassin. He would have been better off with that kind of approach rather than the braggadocious, I'm going to do this, that, and the other approach, which just puts pressure on himself and doesn't allow him to perform to the best of his ability. You know, and I'm not saying Audley Harrison would have done amazing things if he'd taken that other approach, but I think he would have done a bit better than he did. He would have fulfilled his potential, whatever his potential was, you know. Same with Chris Eubank Jr. I think Chris Eubank Jr., he cannot handle pressure the way that his dad could, or the way that, you know, other top fighters can. So, yeah, he needs to change his approach mentally. He needs to really humble himself, to be honest with you. Humble himself, make some changes in his team, and go and learn his trade properly. And maybe one day he'll be ready, but he's no spring chicken. He's like 28 years old. So, It is what it is, man. Maybe one day he'll be ready mentally for top level boxing, but right now he's definitely not. Second time now that he's choked at the highest level and failed to produce. And yeah, he did underperform, but he performed like a guy that in deep down inside felt as though even his best wouldn't be good enough to beat George Groves. That's why he wasn't so confident. If you were truly confident in your own ability, if you're truly confident that your best is good enough to beat George Groves, then you'd show that confidence in your physical actions in the ring, but he didn't. You'd show your confidence. He didn't show it. So even his best is not good enough to beat George Groves. His best at the moment in terms of what he could have done technically and strategically now, that's not good enough to beat George Groves neither. So yeah, he's got a lot of improvements to make if he's ever going to do anything at the highest level in boxing. And he may get worse from now, because that was a humiliating experience. So this could be the making or the breaking of him.
Some people are going to say the fact that Chris Eubank Jr. didn't have an extensive amateur career where he boxed for, his country and what have you, that might be one of the reasons that he seems to choke when he steps up to the highest level. And having a proper amateur career, an extensive amateur career, I think would have helped him. But at the same time, some people just have it and other people don't have it. And I'm talking about the mental makeup to be a top level fighter. If you look at the cruiserweight champion right now, the WBA and IBF cruiserweight champion Murat Gassiev, he didn't have any more amateur fights than Chris Eubank Jr. had. Gassiev didn't have an extensive amateur background. But yet, look how he's performed in the World Boxing Super Series. Look how he's performed at the highest level. Look how he performed against Denis Lebedev, a man with very little amateur experience, who didn't have an extensive amateur career, but yet mentally he just has it. He certainly had a good shooter in Abel Sanchez. He certainly benefited from being around a top level pro in Gennady Golovkin, because he can use Golovkin as an example. He sees the way Golovkin prepares himself for fights mentally, emotionally, the routines that he goes through in the gym, and he emulates what Golovkin does. When you've got a top level guy, a current top level guy in the gym with you like that, it gives you a lot of confidence, because it makes being a champion feel so much more real and so much more achievable, because it makes it feel like it's within touching distance, because in some sense it is, because you have an example of what you're trying to be in your actual gym. So yeah, Gassiev has got some good things in place there, but again, he's somebody who didn't have any more experience in the amateurs than Eubank Jr. had, but mentally he just has it. When it's time to step up, Gassiev has shown that he has that internal, the correct internal constitution to be able to achieve at that type of level in boxing. So we'll see what happens with Chris Eubank Jr. But the attitude that I've seen from him in the post-fight interview or whatever, doesn't look promising. It's pretty disturbing, actually. The stuff that he's been saying, pretty disturbing. And I've heard people say they want us to, Chris Eubank Jr. to drop down to middleweight. Maybe that's the best thing for him. But even more important than dropping back down to middleweight is the change in his training setup, getting himself a proper trainer and changing his mental approach to boxing. This is what's most important. So let me know what you think in the comment section below, people. It's happening. I'm out.